All right, I'm gonna look at my slides here because I have some notes to myself and I want to make sure I don't leave anything out in this limited time frame. But I want you to know that I know on the website it said it was transcending the pandemic narrative, but no, there is an L in there. That was not a misspelling, whoever put that up. And my goal today is to go through with you what I found through my research about what is true, what isn't true, and how to tell the difference within the realms of science and health, because these are the skills that we need as anarchists, as being our own authority, as being separated from individuals who try to tell us what to do. We need to know what to do. So we need to start learning how to look at some scientific issues, right, that we might be intimidated or uncomfortable around because of the language and how it's really created a lot to trick us. So I'm going to drop some big truth bombs today. I hope you appreciate it, and I know you're going to get something out of it. So, of course, what brought us all out over the last 3 years, and what made this event have a little bit of a more urgent focus, is another false narrative. We've had them in the past. We've been through 9/11. We know about the creature from Jekyll Island. We are aware of the climate narrative. And now we have, of course, the germ warfare. So germ theory is created and for the purpose of creating and instilling fear, using to manipulate us. And it's not the first time that we've seen it, because there was SARS and MERS and Zika, bird flu, swine flu, Ebola, dengue, and ultimately the COVIDs. So one of the false reasoning schemes that is used very commonly to create this kind of fear and misinformation is circular reasoning. Now, this is well known about since Socrates began writing about logic fallacies. And I'll just read you a quote of what the definition of circular reasoning. The fallacy of circular reasoning occurs when the conclusion of an argument is essentially the same as one of the premises of the argument. So essentially you state your premises or your assumptions, and then at the end you restate the same premises and the assumptions, but without actually uncovering anything novel in the process. And this is the paradigm that is used to create the appearance of viruses and germs causing disease. And I'll show you that scheme more specifically here. So there's this beginning premise that there is a virus in this sick person, and number two, that viruses in a cell culture cause what's called CPEs, which is really just damaged cells, toxic cells. So they take the fluid from a patient, put it in a cell culture, and they use genetically modified cultures in the laboratory that were created by man. They add several additives, most of which are toxic, some specifically toxic to those types of cells. Then, of course, they see the requisite damage, the CPEs, and then they say that CPE means there is a virus in the sample, and they can do this over and over again, and they get the same result each time, even though it doesn't show anything, and they never do a control sample to show that if they didn't put fluid from a sick patient in there, they would still get CPEs. And that's been done 3 times and shown to be the case, and 2 times were published. 1 time was more recent, but was censored essentially. Now we have the same, oh, sorry, I went through that whole thing and you didn't even see it. But I'll go through it again, because the viral genome, which many have put forth as another type of proof that a virus exists, that it has this computer simulated genome, also is circular reasoning. They start with the premise that there's a virus in the patient without any proof, and that This particular virus has a genome that is 30,000 base pairs long. That's kind of like inches for genomes. And then they take RNA out of the patient's fluid, but of course they don't find a viral genome there. They find 50 million little fragments of genetic material, all of them not knowing what organism they come from. Do they come from the patient, a bacteria, a fungus, etc.? Unknown. But they use some fancy techniques like creating a complementary DNA library and using PCR amplification. They sequence those 50 million short strands like puzzle pieces, put them into a couple of different computer programs, and whichever program spits out something that's 30,000 long, they grab that and call it the viral genome, once again restating the claims. Nothing new is learned in these pseudoscientific experiments. Now, as I was just discussing with the genome, computer models is a definitive giveaway that you're not understanding what occurs in nature. You're understanding what occurs inside of a computer simulation. And I've worked with computer simulations in my career to do drug design with molecular modeling. And the thing about simulations is they don't know what happens in nature. And there are many, many variables and parameters that you have to just choose values out of thin air. And depending on what you choose, you can get a very different outcome. So this has been used to promote many false narratives, such as climate change, where they made computer models of the climate. Now, of course, no one noticed that when you check back a couple years later, it turns out the model was completely wrong, but it generated fear. And that led to countries adopting policies and entering treaties, and that was the purpose of it in the first place. So a computer model is a substitute for real evidence, and it's been used many times during the pandemic, including at the beginning with Ferguson's crazy predictions about everybody and their grandmother dying all at once, which of course were completely false. But also, the PCR test and the genome were both created by computer simulations. They are not representing what's in nature and have never been validated against nature, or even attempted. All variants are determined by computer simulations of a computer simulation. So we have really here, you could say we have an epidemic of computer simulations. Okay, so this is Tom Cowan's book, The Contagion Myth, an excellent read. And I want to make an exciting announcement right now that I've been waiting all day. Del Bigtree, who is going to be here in just a little while, has graciously invited Tom Cowan and me onto the high wire to tell all of his audience and explain how viruses don't exist. So this is the kind of collaboration that comes out of an event like that, like this, like Anarchapulco, because this only happened during this event, right? Because we bring people together and we see that we need to support each other in this community, and that's the way we're going to overcome the tyranny, and we're not going to be fooled by these trickery and false science that I'm going into. Now, contagion is one of those false ideas. Now, I know you've grown up your whole life believing that contagion was true. And I know that even over the last couple of years, when people had the sniffles, you at least had an impulse to distance yourself. But I want to tell you that there have been lots of scientists, including under the United States government, the U.S. Public Health Service, which is the parent of the CDC, where they did well-designed clinical trials with humans and animals to show how contagion happens. And in every single instance, they were not able to make anyone sick by the way we think there is contagion. So I tell you right now, there is no contagion. There are other explanations, and we don't know them all, but some of them are known, such as common exposure. But every single time it's been tested, never once has even one subject in the experiment gotten sick from this. The Spanish flu, herpes, HIV, gonorrhea, etc. Polio. Masks, social distancing, and vaccines are all based on contagion. If that's a lie, then there's no justification for any of those things. And, of course, if you look at the epidemiologic science of those things, you'll also see that there is no benefit whatsoever. One of the methods that they mean to capture you and make you a pawn of these false scientific narratives is through vaccine passports and other tools of surveillance. This is going to be your entrance into the mainstream medical system in the near future, and in some places it already is. You walk into a hospital for any reason, and the first thing they do is suspect you of being infectious. And this is going to be amplified because there are going to be more vaccines for more things with similar toxic technology to what we've experienced recently. So we need to be on the lookout, but I'm not here trying to raise fear. I'm just trying to help you recognize that you don't need the systems that would instill that fear to capture you. We have other things like Codex Alimentarius where they say it's unsafe for us to grow our own food or our own medicines. We're not competent enough to take care of our own health. And this is what's going on when they kill backyard chickens because they say they have bird flu. That's creating evidence that it's dangerous to us. So we need to beware and follow people like Marjorie Wildcraft, who's here, who's teaching you how to raise your own food. That's the way nature intended it. So now I'm going to kind of bullet point here a bunch of things that you were taught were facts or valid scientific theories that my colleagues and I have researched in detail and determined that these are actually false statements. Now, I don't have the time, unfortunately, because I could give a 3-hour presentation where I'd present all this evidence. But I assure you that if you look carefully, do your own research, that you will come to the same conclusions. So these are scientific theories which are false. Science is consensus-based. Governments and agencies are scientific authorities. False. Disease comes from a foreign invader and spreads from person to person. False. Health comes from a pill. In fact, according to the Journal of the American Medical Association itself, 160,000 deaths occur from prescription medications each year in the United States. It's your bad genes or bad luck that made you sick, and there's nothing you can do about it. False. The body makes bad mistakes. It makes too much or too little of things like hormones. It has useless parts like your appendix. It makes your blood pressure too high to harm you. The brain chemicals are imbalanced. And since we are smarter than the body, we know what to do, so we give them the right amount of these things. Big false. The body fails with age. Dementia is inevitable. Arthritis is wear and tear. You're going to have wrinkles, cellulite, skin atrophy, and loss of vitality. False. If it's not working properly, simply cut it out of the body. Gallbladder, appendix, knee cartilage. Disease is incurable and requires lifelong treatment. That's a business model, not a scientific fact. Vaccines are the miracle of modern medicine. I think you can replace the miracle with a few select 4-letter words. Detox is a joke. Even if you feel perfectly healthy, if you have a positive test, you're sick and dangerous. DNA is the blueprint of your body's functions. That's false too. There aren't enough genes to make the blueprint. Simple mathematical error that no mainstream scientists have acknowledged. Antibodies are specific. The immune system provides immunity, both false. Membrane receptors exist, false. Synapses between nerve cells exist, false. Water is a passive solvent, false. That's a big false. Now I know some of these things you're looking at me with a little bit of shock. I promise you, go do some research. You're going to be shocked even more. So I want to quote Isaac Asimov here. Science does not promise absolute truth, nor does it consider that such a thing necessarily even exists. Science does not even promise that everything in the universe is amenable to the scientific process. So it's important to acknowledge that there are things we do not know and things that we cannot know. And I'll give you one more quote, this time from Copernicus, related to that. To know that we know what we know, and to know that we do not know what we do not know, that is true knowledge. And how many of you have left off the second part? So I'm going to tell you what we know is true. Okay, this is the opposite of the first list. Okay, this is what we know is true. Science is based on nature. Opinion, belief, or consensus have no bearing on the matter. The body is a self-healing machine. And if that sounds a little bit hard to believe, just think about when you get a cut on your skin and you do absolutely nothing to it. What does the body do? It heals itself to the point that you have no evidence that even existed in the first place. Well, do you think that's just limited to your skin? Of course it is not. Everything needed for optimal health is available in nature because we were created as part of nature. There is the law of cause and effect. For every effect there is a cause, and every cause has an effect. And this is how we can really understand what's causing or getting in the way of our health. Humans can live between 120 and 150 years. And there's evidence even in the New York Times of this, but of course we have lost touch with this fact. And in fact, right now, our longevity is diminishing by official statistics. Many, if not all, chronic health conditions are caused by man-made toxins and poisons. Water fasting is nature's cure. We are capable of learning and managing our own health. Humans have extrasensory abilities that we have forgotten about, such as remote viewing. Rupert Sheldrake has uncovered some of this. There is third eye reading. All of these things are easily verifiable. There are demonstrations and courses and workshops you can attend if you haven't heard of this. But these are all real capabilities that humans have, and they've even been exploited by the US government. So I want to bring up an important quote from one of my personal spiritual mentors. The pursuit of truth is your spiritual journey. So what do we do to deal with all of these problems and difficulties and disinformation? We pursue truth. Truth will allow us to take right action and to experience justice. So how do we do that? Well, we have to withdraw from the systems that seek to manipulate and disinform us. So stop watching television, stop following mainstream media, stop listening to public health agencies, cancel your health insurance, learn how to negotiate with the hospital if you have a trauma emergency like a bone sticking out of your leg and you need their help. Don't sign forms, especially the one that promises to pay, because they can't tell you how much it's going to cost, right? And you can't agree to something when you don't know the terms. And this is how you can get your needs taken care of without being manipulated. Stop taking pharmaceuticals and vaccines. Find a better way. Stop going for checkups, getting lab tests, and screening tests. These are just sales ploys to get you deeper into their business model, which is lifelong ways to ruin your health. Thank you. So, without the benefit of a malevolent system, you must become your own teacher, an autodidact. So believe in yourself and in your own ability to become healthy, because it's within all of us. Learn about health yourself so that you and your family will know what's what. And this includes nutrition, detoxification, psycho-spiritual health, which includes addressing trauma, which we all have, addictions, which we all have, relationship issues, which we all have. And they can all be improved in each and every one of us. Become comfortable with death, because it's a certainty. Taxes are not. Form local interest groups and share information. In other words, support each other in your local communities and exchange ideas, information, and materials. Keep appropriate medical supplies in your home, and of course I have educational material on that on my website. Eat real food, not chemicals, not processed, not dopamine-driving sweets, real food. Engage in contemplative practice, prayer, meditation, sitting quiet in nature, grounding, earthing. Express gratitude, because we all have so much to be grateful for, especially this week. That's right. If you're overwhelmed with all of this, find help. Right? Come to my website. I offer many different programs, from Q&A webinars to one-on-one teaching to courses, and there are many, many other people here with excellent educational materials for you to learn from. In fact, we're in a golden age of natural healing right now. It's the Wild West, and it's going to be amazing in the future. You need to have discernment. That means telling what's reliable and what's not. Not what's absolutely true, because we can't always know that or ever know that, but what's close, what makes sense. Think about things carefully, okay? And that also includes in the source of information, okay? Just like me, don't believe everything I tell you today, even though it is correct. But please go and do your own research. Come get references from me, or find them and decide for yourself. And if I'm incorrect, come and give me that information so I can learn and hone my knowledge. The experiment is the most important thing to understand. When you see a journalistic article about health, journalists don't understand this stuff very well, but they want you to read their article, so they sensationalize things. But they always tell you their source, so go to the source, go to the scientific paper, get out your medical scientific dictionary, and see if it makes sense. See if it even is what they said in the article, because many times it's not even what they said. Okay, what are the potential errors and biases going on here? Are they trying to learn something, or are they trying to sell something? Right? You guys are wise enough to not get cheated in a transaction, buying a house or a car. It's the same thing with science. Just think it's their salesman trying to sell you their medicines and injections. Don't interpret results based on false theories or assumptions. For example, if you look at other articles believing viruses are real, you'll misinterpret the other article. If you look at it knowing they're not real, you could probably not even read it, because you know it doesn't represent what's in nature. So we learned about the scientific method back in grade school. I know my daughter had it in her second grade curriculum. We all remember hypothesis, methods, results, conclusion. And if we just go back to that and realize that anything in nature that is said to have a cause and effect relationship, like what makes us sick, What causes a thunderstorm? What causes an earthquake? Why do the waves come? If you have an hypothesis about what causes any one of those things, then you can use that's when you use the scientific method and you say, let's design a scientific method experiment to test this hypothesis. And in order to do that, you just need really two important things. You need something to test. That's what you think causes it. And they call that an independent variable. So it needs to be independent in the experiment, because in one group where you're going to test it, you're going to put it in the experiment and see if it causes the effect. And in the other group, called a control group, absolute necessity, you're going to leave out the independent variable just to make sure you don't get the same effect anyway. And it's super, super important that you have both of these elements. Now, when it comes to the claim that viruses cause disease, they don't have either of those. There's no independent variable because there's no purified virus. They use a mixture of unknown things. That's not very scientific. And the other aspect is they don't do a control experiment where they do everything else in the experiment the same but leave out the independent variable, because they don't have an independent variable, so they really can't do it. And anytime you see a violation of the scientific method, you can instantly throw out the results and conclusions, because that's an unscientific study. So learning this simple technique allows you to figure out any cause or effect relationship. Is it real or not? So it's extremely, extremely powerful. Now, there are other tricks about this, but I'm not going to get into them today, but things like animal studies, making sure that analytical models are validated, etc., etc. So we could have a course on this, but I'm just going to introduce you that if you just get what I said so far, 99% of the time, you are not going to be fooled. Now, when they try to give the appearance of using the scientific method when they're actually not, that's what is called pseudoscience. And what we have here in published literature, even acknowledged by the mainstreams, such as Professor Ioannidis at Stanford University, that more than 50% of published research findings are false, including all of virology, of course. That's what we call pseudoscience. Now, one of the ways that they pass off pseudoscience, and of course many people who are detractors of my position also use these techniques, we're talking about logic fallacies. Now, I told you about circular reasoning, or also called begging the question, but I want to show you a few more, because this is a whole field of study unto itself. But let me tell you the most common ones that I've experienced, so you can keep an eye, and you're all familiar with these. And what this is this is a way to subvert a real conversation that is trying to find fact and truth, to just basically badger the other person into a false conclusion to agree with you, right? So it's a way to cheat in an argument, basically. But most people don't even realize when they're doing this. So ad hominem is kind of obvious, because that's when you just say, hey, you're just a jerk, so you must be wrong. But even jerks are right sometimes. Appeal to authority. Now, this is a big one I've faced, right? Now, Ernie was bragging about my credentials, but they said, you're not even a virologist. That's right. Professionally, I was actually a psychiatrist, so I have no business talking about viruses, right? Of course not. Anyone who has knowledge is part of the conversation. We are all sovereign beings. Every single one of us has a right to say our piece, and all of our opinions are just as valid as every other one's. The straw man, thank you. The straw man fallacy. Well, if viruses aren't real, then what explains herpes? These are two separate questions, and this is a way to divert the argument, because if I don't have another explanation for herpes, it doesn't speak to viruses at all, right? So we have to find out who made a claim. So the claim is a virus causes this. Okay, is there evidence? No. Well, then the claim is false. It's as simple as that. And the truth is, as I said, we don't know what causes many things because no one has studied it. No one has come up with alternative hypotheses because everyone's just gone along with this mainstream brainwashing. Burden of proof fallacy as well. What's your proof viruses don't exist? Well, you can't prove a negative, remember? Okay, so he who makes the claim requires proof. Root cause analysis is the way to understand things. You always want to get down to the root, right? And this is, when I work with clients, this is what we do. I hear their story, I ask questions, I get more details, and eventually we get to the root. The very first thing that set off their health problems, and that is always the thing you have to address because that's what's set off the chain of events, right? And it's the same thing when you try to explain phenomena out there. We've gotten into another error in modern science where we look at things that are proxies for nature. We do simulated experiments in the laboratory, in a computer, right? These are not really what's going on. We, instead of looking at, did someone live longer, instead we look at a biomarker in their blood, right, that correlates with long life, but does it really? Is that guaranteed? So we need to really look at directly at nature and get to the root cause. So I want to just introduce what I'm personally doing to make this happen because I think we all came here to share ideas about what we can each individually do after this conference to bring about this new infrastructure that we might call anarchy. So I'm developing educational platforms through courses, webinars, workshops. I work, I have material for the general audience and for health professionals. And I even have apprenticeships. Over the last year, I trained an amazing family medicine doctor, Grayson Dart, and now he is an independent natural healing practitioner instead of a drug pusher. I create a lot of media. I'm sure some of you have seen my films and interviews and podcasts. And this is to generate awareness and inspire people to look into more detailed material. I also archive all the historical scientific documents and opinions related to this pandemic in my True Medicine library for posterity and to preserve the historical archive. I collaborate on original research related to water, fasting, and whatever else comes my way. I work with people individually for health consultations, and I love coming out to places like this and doing public speaking. So I want to leave you with a final message about where we are going from here, because it's really all up to you. When you exit the medical system and you take away their power and place it in your hands, and that spreads to our hands collectively. And of course, with this comes great responsibility, which I've taught you about today. But I want you to know that your effort is not in isolation. We are not islands. We are all connected through our commonality and common spirit. And the law of correspondence, which says as above, so below, that our effort in our individual scale will spread to the greater consciousness and develop more and more momentum to help us completely exit the system. And that's what we're going to do starting right now.
Okay, they didn't have that set for me, did they? We're going to do some Q&A for just a few questions. We have like 10 minutes, so that's what we're going to do. You don't mind if we do some Q&A, do you?
I love doing Q&A.
We got extra time. Anybody? Okay, here we go. I hold. Nobody gets to touch the microphone. I never get it back.
So you mentioned when you were talking about isolating the virus as an example of that it doesn't exist. Is it not possible that it's just a lack in our tools or our technology? Like, we don't have the current ability to do that. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
Well, anything is possible, but there's simply no evidence that it does. So to assume that we should still believe something because at the present time we have no evidence for it and our technology isn't sophisticated enough to generate evidence, it's not a very strong reason to hold on to an idea.
I have a question. What do you think about graphene oxide in vaccines? Because there is a documentary called Blue Truth. And I have also done some research, with Bluetooth signals from people that have had the vaccine. What do you think it is?
Okay, so a lot of people have this question, don't they? This is the 4th time today I've been asked this question. I should record my answer and just play it back. But we don't know what's in the vaccine. It's a very, very difficult scientific problem to take an unknown sample that has an unknown number of constituents and figure out exactly what those things are. Now, with respect to graphene, and this was discussed with me and Del on the panel this earlier today, that the one animal toxicology study where they gave graphene to experimental animals and they got really sick. I mean, it is a toxic substance, so I'm not denying that. They showed that in their cells under the microscope after they died, the membranes of the cells were black. And this is a characteristic finding, a reliable finding of graphene poisoning. So if there were graphene in injections, what I would expect is that autopsies of individuals who died from an injection, under the microscope, they would have black outlined cells. And that simply hasn't been seen. So in my mind, I don't need to look further. I would say that there's not any clear evidence of graphene in this technology. And I think we don't really know for sure what's in it. And there's clear evidence that each batch may contain different things. So of course that makes the problem twice or 3 times or 100 times as hard to solve.
Okay, here.
Okay, 2 quick things. I know of a lot of people that take vitamins, and I've taken them, and I felt worse after taking them. And do you have any remedies for kidney stones?
Kidney stones is easy, just drink a lot of water. Okay, so I agree with you about vitamins, and I can give you more specific recommendations about kidney stones sometime. But this is a very good point about vitamins, because vitamins are pharmaceuticals in disguise. Now, I recently looked at a paper showing how they originally discovered vitamin C in lemons. And I want to say, first of all, when those sailors back in the day, according to the legend, had scurvy, and they ate certain foods, their symptoms got better. But that is not proof that the foods were specific to their disease. Okay, so in other words, they didn't have a deficiency of lemons, even though lemons made them better, because we know we can live an entire healthy life without ever eating lemons. But this idea came that there was something in the lemon that they were missing in their body, or that somehow was a cure, and so they tried to isolate it from lemons. But in order to get this powder that they called vitamin C or ascorbic acid, they actually had to do 5 chemical reactions on the lemon, including mixing with reagents like lead acetate. Now, do you think doing chemical reactions with lead and several chemical reactions, that by the end when you get a white powder, are you sure that that white powder was actually in the lemon to begin with? Or is it something that you created through the process of doing 5 chemical reactions? And this is unfortunately the problem with virtually every vitamin. So we know that if we eat healthy foods, and a variety of foods, and certain foods are particularly seem to be healthy and nutrient rich, that we have health. But we don't really know if any of these vitamin things are even a real thing at all, or they could even be completely man-made. However, in some instances, they can be very useful. When I worked in mainstream hematology, there was a rare type of leukemia called promyelocytic leukemia, and AML-M3, if there's any doctors out there. And every other leukemia was a death sentence, acute one in adults. But this one, no chemo, high dose vitamin A. And each one of them was cured. It was one of the only cures I saw in all of my experience Okay, so they can sometimes be useful, I'm not denying that, but in very discrete, careful circumstances, but not something you need to supplement with or take. Everything that you need is provided in nature, and you can get it from a natural source. That's my opinion.
Yeah, hi there. So I think everybody remembers the magnetism videos that were, showing up all over the internet for, 6 months or so. And there seemed to be, hundreds of people that were showing this, and from all over the world. And we had magnets sticking on the chest, on the forehead, on the back. I don't know if anybody here has had an experience like firsthand with that, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on whether or not you think those videos were just, some CG or some effects, or if you think there might be something to that.
At the time, I thought that there were some videos that seemed to be genuine and legitimate. I don't have a clear explanation. I don't think anyone else does. But I did do a little investigation, of course, into that, and I looked at the different types of magnetic properties of materials, because there are several types. There's diamagnetism, paramagnetism, ferromagnetism. And it turns out when I looked at the properties of graphene, and the reason why graphene is such a useful material is because of its unique magnetic properties, and they change based on the physical conditions. But they didn't seem that they would actually make those ferromagnetic type magnets stick, but other metals could. So could there be other metals in some of those injections accounting for that? It's certainly possible. And Twinetta Gatti, an Italian researcher who has a very special analytic technology that combines electron microscopy with X-ray diffraction spectrometry, and I know that's a lot of words there, she can actually look at a sample and tell what atoms are in it, and that's an excellent starting point. It's even better than mass spec. So she might have some information on that.
Thank you. What about those white clots made out not of blood?
Well, I haven't seen any science.
The question was, what are the blood clots not made out of blood? Right?
Gotcha.
Okay.
So blood clots are normally made of fibrin, which is a protein that polymerizes from the blood clotting factors. Now, I haven't seen a study that actually did an examination of any clots taken out of an injected victim, but I will say that it deserves some more careful examination, because there is a condition that existed way before COVID called HIT-HAT syndrome, heparin-induced thrombocytopenia, heparin-associated thrombosis. And this is from heparin, the blood-thinning drug, which is given to many, many hospital patients, okay, like almost ubiquitously used. And it can cause this condition where essentially the entire blood turns into white clots. They call it white clot syndrome. So first my question would be is that what is the explanation for some of these findings? And if not, how is it different? Because that's a known entity. And maybe there was a way that heparin was used actually to poison people through these injections. Maybe there was another variety of heparin that was more toxic, for example. So that would be something good to investigate.
Okay. Last question, and then you go ahead and wrap up. Here you go.
Thanks, Andy. You mentioned your about water and water fasting, and I just wanted to ask you, what would be the minimum length of time to minimum and maximum of water fasting, and do you have to add stuff into the water, and how long do you need to do it before you start seeing some kind of healing?
Right, great question. Well, I tell you, most Americans can fast for about 10 minutes, but that's not quite enough. So listen, fasting can be intimidating for some people because you're afraid that you're going to have horrible hunger and be miserable and tortured and such, and it's all true. No, really, it's not true at all, okay? It's nature's most powerful and most pure healing mechanism. But if you're nervous about starting, just go 24 hours. Try that the first time, and then the next time see if you can go 48 hours and then 72 hours. Now, if you want a life-changing experience from fasting, it has to be 21 days. And if you're going to do this longer than 7 days, you should have professional supervision. Okay? And I can make referrals for that. I know where the good places are. I've told everyone during my workshop that last year I did a 26-day fast after the conference because I needed to recover from the Anarchapulco partying. And it was very effective. Don't add anything to the water.
I apologize. We have one other question here. He was in line. I missed him.
Checking. Thank you, Dr. Kaufman, for everything you do. I recently saw a video from Dr. David Nixon talking about colloidal gold and the effects of colloidal gold on nanotechnology. Are you familiar with colloidal gold or any of the effects it might have on nanotech?
No, my favorite kind of gold is bullion, and I suggest everyone would benefit from that. I'll have to do some research. You're the second person who mentioned that here, but I really never heard of it before, so I promise I'll report on it in the future. I got to tell you that it's really a special treat to be here and away from the Syracuse winter and before such an amazing and inspiring crowd. So I look forward to seeing you next time. God bless you.